No, I just wanted to say, for whoever doesn't know, I'm here sitting beside what is, for me, a master, a mentor. I hadn't met Edmundo until last week, but his book and the screenplay of Memories of Underdevelopment, I think, was one of the greatest sources of inspirations that I had for my film, Elena, and as a human being as well, as a Latin American person. It's a film, Memories of Underdevelopment. It's a film, and the book are really a masterpiece, and made me at least understand what it meant to be a person that is divided between two cultures. In his case, Cuba and English-speaking culture. In my case, Brazilian. And what it means to be a subjective, at the same time, having had a political, such a strong political tradition from my parents, how to then turn that into a subjectivity. But I'm not speaking very well because I'm very nervous, so I'm going to wait for them, and then maybe I can pronounce what I want to say better in a bit. Thank you.
Well, I can share in your nervousness, because Edmundo Desnoes is a master for me too. I teach his novel, and I teach the adaptation of his novel into film in my courses regularly, Memories of Underdevelopment, and I've just invited him to come to Yale, so, and you too, you should come to Yale. Well, it is really, really a pleasure to be here, and thank you so much for such a moving film, such a poetic investigation of so many things. I think it is a film that is haunted to me by many questions, and I'm just going to propose 2 or 3 of these lines of haunting issues that appear when I see it. This is the second time I see it. And the first thing that I would like to share with you is that it is haunted by what it means to be a woman and have one's own story and access to one's own story. In a sense, I think that the beginning of the film is your mother being a siren in Minas Gerais, trying to find a voice out of a narrative into which she was born, which was a society lady, and trying to get out of this narrative as a siren, as a little siren tries to get out of that narrative. And the interesting thing that I find about the way you do this is that the film thematizes the difficulty of particularly women of accessing their own story, because the first way out that your mother has in the film is to become an actress, that is to play someone else's role, not write her own script. And in a sense, I see this film as a genealogy of women trying to find their own voice, their own script, getting to the point where it comes to Petra finding her own script. Unfortunately, Elena could not find her own script. But in this sense, I see a film haunted by this historical problem of women trying to access their own story. And in this sense, I would like to ask you, I see this film as haunted by literature, and the figures that you chose are all women: Ophelia, Electra, the sirens, and they're all women who have something in common, I think. First of all, they are mourning their fathers. Ophelia is, I would hesitate to say that she goes mad because Hamlet has rejected her. I would more say that her relation to her father is the problem. And the fact that here we have a father who has not been properly buried. There's a lack of burial rites, and this is going to be my second line of haunting, which is Latin America. There's a lack of burial rites there. The second figure that appears is the siren, and the difficulty of becoming a woman and dying in the attempt. You know, if we were to say Almodovar's version, how to survive, how to become a woman and not die in the attempt. And the third is Electra, which is a figure that appears right before her death, the eve before Elena's death, and to me conveys a figure of someone involved in killing the mother, in this case metaphorically killing the narrative that has formed you, the narrative of your mother, the narrative of the lady of society, the narratives with which we come, right? So I would like to start by this haunting of literature in your film.
Thank you. Yes, I was the first time I actually read The Little Mermaid, the real story, was when I was writing the script for the film with my screenwriter Carolina Ziskinji, and there it really became very clear for me how this metaphor of a woman that is underwater but dreaming of the world out of the water, where she could actually walk and have legs, resonated with my mother's stories and my sister's story, that they were trying to escape this underwater world, whatever it was for each, and go into another world. And something that was very strong in one of the interviews I did with my mother was that she said that when she watched Godfather 3, she identified so much because in Godfather 1, when Al Pacino, his character, who I forgot the name, decides that he, at the end of Godfather 1, right, he decides that he will finally enter into the mafia. He is determining, this is my mother's interpretation, the death of his daughter, because he's risking his entire life system and putting what will be the future at risk. And my mother interpreted that she had put her entire future at risk when she decided to join the communist cause and fight against the military dictatorship in Brazil. And so that was her siren call, in a way of saying, like, I will do the treaty with Ursula and lose my voice in order to gain legs, not knowing that what that would cause in the future. So that could be one interpretation. But I'd love to, if we had the chance to open to questions, and more than anything to hear a little bit of Edmundo. So.
Well, I don't think I should say anything more after I shouldn't say anything, because after the way that Petra presented me, I can only fall and crash from the pedestal she has put me on, but I'll try. I want to read 2 pages just about the experience, the resonance that her film had on my own experience, and it was overwhelming, and I found, like, let's not use the cliche soulmate, something equivalent to that. And after I saw it for the first time, I wrote this. Obviously, it's called Elena. Most literature and films are polysemic, have several possible readings. I have experienced Elena from both a historic and a narrative perspective. The visual documentary illusion is just a form, the appearance of what I find to be a quest for identity and inner meaning. The life of the narrator is just a diving board which Petra from which Petra takes a leap to reveal the search of Elena as she turns and twists in the air and plunges into the water of being a woman in the 21st century. Latin American cinema has been historically, with rare exceptions, too heavily loaded on the expression of outward reality, on too much social realism, folklore, and crude surfaces, pretending to reveal our predicament in the sound of fury of our aspirations and social behavior. In Brazil, from the films of Glauber Rocha to City of God. Even my close friend Titón couldn't avoid a Cuban tragicomic journey in Guantanamera. They might be classic films, but create a lopsided vision of our continent. Petra Costa has turned away from the sound and fury, turned inward to explore our subjectivity, delve into the waters of our consciousness and our need for an individual, personal identity. Elena emerges from the womb of her socially committed parents. She even uses documentary footage to state her origins and then turns away from the collective to explore the individual. The rest of the film is a desperate need for the expression of the self. We suffer from too much Don Quixote in his absolute certainty and too little from the doubts and ambiguity of Hamlet. Elena is a film that attempts to restore the much needed balance in Latin America between the outward expression and the inward quest. Now I will explore why I see Elena beyond history and an integral expression of a dangerous Western myth, Narcissus. In her quest, she is only able to see herself and rejects most attempts by the other to claim her love. Narcissa rejects Echo, and the entire background is a throbbing echo. A tenuous stream of light and streets and houses. She dances alone, moves into herself, aided by a rope. There is no face-to-face conversations with either her mother or her sister, only the narrative of Petra and the close-ups of her mother. I see the three women as one. You, the audience, are the three women, and so am I as I watch Elena find her image, find herself in the waters into which she plunges. We are all water, time. Mirrors and coupling are abominable, Borges wrote, because they multiply the number of men and women. And Petra shows we are all one and the same. Elena finds herself in her image, in her dancing image, in her sad portrait. She ends inexorably fulfilling herself in suicide by joining time as water flowing. It is a consummation devoutly to be wished, to die, to sleep. I saw and continue to see Elena, the film and the character, as an authentic vision of our mortality. La derrota, once again I quote Borges, tiene una dignidad que la ruidosa victoria no merece. Defeat has a dignity that noisy victory does not deserve. Last but not least, this is a film where woman is universal, not man. Men have had centuries to represent the human predicament. Now it is woman's turn to have an opportunity to make her own mistakes. I am looking forward to her century, although at age 83, I will not be around to see much. The men in Petra's Elena are piedras, stones. They only make very short appearances, her father and her, I imagine, boyfriend, static close-ups. I hope Elena receives in New York the recognition that eluded her during her life. Thank you.
Do you want to open it to the audience? I want to ask you a quick question along the lines that the two of you were speaking. You said that Edmundo Desnoes and Tomás Gutiérrez Alea, with Memories of Underdevelopment, were a great inspiration. And this is, of course, a film of the finding the hinge between the political story, the collective story, the official archive, the unofficial archive of a country, of a nation, in this case Cuba, and the personal, right? And I'm thinking of a case in Brazil, and I want to ask you about this Coutinho and Cabra Marcado para Morar, man marked to die, or man listed to die, which is a fascinating exploration of a film that begins as a documentary recording or reenacting the peasant leagues in the north of Brazil, and is interrupted by the 1964 dictatorship, military coup, and is redone in 1982 by Coutinho when he returns to this place in search of the peasants who were going to act in that interrupted film, and finds the leader, the female leader actually, a widow of a leader that had been assassinated. And the film ends up being about her personal life, her personal story, her loss of contact with her children, and it all begins to be a reunion of the families. I wanted to ask you if this is part of your inspiration.
Definitely, yes. This film was extremely advanced for its time in the way it was both a fiction and a documentary. It's kind of these reflections about films that we do and they don't work, so we go back many years later and redo them in a much more reflexive way, and opening many cracks that become them so interesting. There's another film, Santiago, which came later, which I think could only have existed because of Cabra Marcado. But yes, it was a great inspiration.
Okay, shall we take questions? Put my glasses. Yes. Do you have a microphone or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Congratulations. It's amazing. Very touching for me. I was wondering if you had a script before you did all the shots, or because you have a lot of different shots, even like the building you lived in, you have multiple takes of the same building. And did you have a script first and shot later, or did you shoot and then fill in the gaps, basically?
Did everyone hear? Well, Janice Davila is here. She's the director of photography of the film. There were three, but she was the main one. And, well, it was a constant back and forth between the editing room, shooting, and writing. And the first time I came to New York alone and kind of did a little bit of research and filmed with the Super 8 camera, and then went back, edited, and got finance in place. And that's when I came back with Janice, and we filmed the house, and we filmed most of the footage that is there, like when my mother came as well. And we managed to get into the house. But still there wasn't like a screenplay that was written. There were ideas of what I wanted to tell, and my memories that were written and scenes I knew I needed. But there was so much. It was all surprise, basically, because I didn't know who we were going to find, who were the people that were still alive, the memories that people had of Elena. I did 50 interviews. Poor Janice was there listening to my entire family talk about Elena, and none of that got into the film. But except for that moment when I'm over the bridge and you hear them speaking about how we look alike. And so I think most of the screenplay was written after everything was shot, just to answer your question more precisely.
Do you see any thematic similarities between your film and Casa d'Area, and also a more recent film, the English title of which is Found Memories?
Found Memories? Who was it by? Lucia Murat? No. Casa de Areia is the one that takes place, that the house starts to, by Andrusha, right? I didn't like that film. I've been there to where it's been filmed, and I think a beautiful, beautiful film could come out of that place. It's such a paradise. It's Lençóis Maranhenses. And I don't know, that film didn't touch me. But yeah, the story itself has many similarities to the house with 3 women, I think, and it's being eaten by the sand. And there's this idea of the ruin and decay. I just wanted to say a little story that is so beautiful and reveals the power of cinema, because if this film allowed me to somehow regain a sister with such a force that I'd never had imagined it would come to being, like finding 20 hours of archival material and going back to the 80s where I had no memory. Memories of Underdevelopment gave him a love, which is a story I found today in The Guardian. That, I don't know if it would be too much to tell, but how you do feel uncomfortable with me telling it? Okay, but maybe you can look into it. It's amazing how cinema can bring life into our own life, and it was a coincidence that I saw today that touched me very much.
Any more questions?
This is your first movie?
Yes, the first feature.
Bueno, that's back.
You said there was 3 cinematographers that shot this film, and how long did it take to shoot the film?
It took, because there was so much back and forth, it took 2.5 years of the whole process of editing and filming.
And how many cinematographers did you have?
There were 3 main cinematographers, but since it was scattered through time and space, sometimes I would be in a place and the cinematographer, that none of the 3 would be available, and I would shoot with someone else, so there were more people involved. I think, yeah, but so there were little bits and fragments, but by a couple of other cinematographers. Thank you so much.
How did you come to some of the soundtrack choices, music, which I was going to make sure to bring attention to the wonderful aesthetic as a matter of that collage of those decisions?
Through many influences, there's a composer that I met during the process. Her name is Maggie Clifford. She sings at the end, and there are a couple of recordings that are hers. And I met her and told her about the film. I heard her voice. It inspired me a lot, and she did a couple of original compositions for the film. And there were other songs that came through the archival footage, like the Mamas and the Papas, which Elena danced with the moon with, and the piano that's at the middle and at the end, which is by a Brazilian composer that's 22 years old, and he did that piece when he was 18.
Was there music, as a follow-up if I could ask, was there music in your life that was a part of an experience at all as a motif or something you recalled in the process? I'm curious because there was such the dancer for you all from such a young time. It seems it was expressed to us. I'm wondering if that ever entered into your decisions.
The tunes that are in the film? Well, the Mamas and the Papas, I think, is the one that I had greatest relationship from my childhood. Would you like to say something else?
About what? Well, these are technical thing. I see that more, even this, I would say that it is not a documentary, it's a work of creation, because I think documentaries are about facts, and this is about meaning. There's a basic difference. Although it's used as a diving board, she jumps on it, but then she turns and twists and goes into the water. So I really see this more as a fiction, and not only a fiction, something that almost touches mythology, the identity within all human beings, the three women. They merge into each other, and in the background as an echo that we try to approach. So I see it both, and yet historically it's very important to me because I've for many years tried to avoid the sound and the fury and the social or folkloric nature of Latin America. And really, my film has to do with the Cuban Revolution, but yet it is what Ortega said, the Spanish philosopher says, you are you, yo soy yo y mi circunstancia. I am myself and my circumstance. And the circumstance is something as a background that helps you express yourself and discover yourself. And I think she does that, especially in a history of a cinema and of a culture in general that tries to use more the surface, the events that are less interior, as if reality reveals yourself. I believe interiority is what reveals reality, and reality does not reveal interiority. It's like our construction is what matters, and that's why I was so impressed by Elena. This going beyond and having reality, having the history, and then having a culture that you transcend, and then you create a myth.
On that note, we are going to have to finish. And please join me in really, really congratulating Petra for such a wonderful, wonderful gift that you have given.
Thank you so much, Moira. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Edmundo Desnoes. Thank you, everyone, for staying. And please help us spread the word about the film.